when people think Republican, they do think New York. And that is because she has been a leader in the House Republican Conference. She's certainly been a leader here in New York, and that is Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, who is here today. But again, we're here to talk. This is the last week of session. I know the Congresswoman is going to talk about a lot of things. I'm sure my colleague, Leader Barclay, will as well. I'm going to just try to be top, kind of high level. It's the last week of what feels like one of the longest sessions in my 11-year time here in the Senate. Now, maybe I think that every year, but this year I really think it's true. And you only need to look at the 40-day late, $11 billion increase, bloated $254 billion budget that was passed. You only need to look at the priorities, what we're passing down the stretch here. Before time runs out, we have to pass EPR, which is going to increase families' grocery bills by average of $600 or more a year. We're passing aid and dying, assisted suicide. That's the priority. With all the issues facing New Yorkers, I can tell you, no one called my office over the last several months and said, you know what we need? We need this bill. They called about affordability. They called about crime. They called about taxes. They called about energy prices. They called about grocery prices. They called about CDPAP. They called about education. No one called about this, but this is the Democrats' priorities. Misplaced, out of step. But they've grown arrogant because of their one-party control that they don't think people care or are going to hold them accountable. They talk about affordability, and yet they passed a budget that was $11 billion more year over year. Our budget today is $60 billion more than Florida's budget, even though Florida has way more people. In fact, pretty soon, Florida will have more New Yorkers. They've done everything they can to make this state less affordable, from energy prices to grocery bills to taxes, property taxes. That is why people are leaving. That is why businesses are leaving. They talk about public safety, and yet they've done everything they can to prioritize criminals and those who have broken our laws over those who we ask to protect and defend us. They support labor unless you're a public safety labor union or unless you work in the energy sector. They talk and they talk about, respect for all, yet they are seen to be a bastion of voices of anti-Semitism, anti-Israel, anti-Jewish hate. They talk about, making a better country, and yet the only people they seem to want to bring to New York State are those who are here illegally, taking more resources and no doubt a contributing factor to driving legal New Yorkers, tax-paying New Yorkers out of this state. And no doubt over the next several days, every major bill that they pass will crystallize their priorities. Their priorities are not about affordability. To hell with affordability. They will continue to drive up your energy bills, your grocery bills, your property taxes, the cost of living in this state. And they will tell you that it is for the greater good because they know better than you. It is an elitist mentality. Governor Hochul wants to talk about, what an abomination to have the National Guard try to quell the riots in LA while she deploys the National Guard here in New York in prisons. Don't let the hypocrites get away with it. I'm not gonna. Barclay's not gonna, and I can bet you can bet your ass Congresswoman Stefanik's not gonna. We need a different vision in this state. We need a different set of priorities. We've had other people here, other leaders. I think about Tom Homan. We've had people here that I think articulate our message very well that we do every day, and are a reminder that what we fight for here in this conference, in the Assembly Conference, here in Albany, it is not a losing battle. We may not always win the floor votes here, but we have allies in Washington. We have allies locally. We have people who are fighting just as hard to make this state a better place to live for all hardworking, tax-paying, legal New Yorkers. And at this time, I want to call up one of those people who's fighting very hard. Certainly my friend and colleague in the Assembly Republican Conference, someone who is no stranger to all these issues, someone who I know has known the Congresswoman for many years, and that is my good friend, Assembly Republican leader, Will Barclay.
Well, thank you very much, Ortt. Good. Are we still morning? Yep, just about. Good morning to everybody. I want to thank the leader for hosting this event and appreciate the partnership that he and his conference have with the Assembly Republicans. And I obviously want to thank my colleagues from the Assembly for being here this morning too. Rob mentioned it a little bit. I just want to, I think it's worth bearing and worth repeating, which I've done at multiple press conferences, but I just want to talk a minute about the state budget, because it really is the epitome of what the Democrats have done to New York State. First of all, it doesn't always get a lot of coverage. Maybe it's not all that important, but taken in context with all the other messes the Democrats have made of New York, it was the latest budget we've had in 15 years. It spends almost $250 billion. And when you talk about trillion in any budget, even the federal budget, you know you're talking about a lot of money. And this is a statistic I always find maybe the most interesting. It's $77 billion more than it was 5 years ago. And I dare any of our Democratic colleagues, to look New York voters in the eye and say, are we really $77 billion better off than we were 5 years ago? I'm going to surmise most New Yorkers would say absolutely not. Instead of doing what they're doing down here, we should be leading the nation as opportunity and for quality of life. Instead, we lead the nation in unaffordability. We lead the nation in crime. And maybe most tragic of all, we lead the nation in out-migration. It's so bad that I think in 2030, and Congressman, you probably very acutely aware of this, we may lose 2 congressional seats. Now, one-party rule in Albany, what do? They're going to blame it on Trump. They blame everything on Trump. So I just want to give you some statistics that I brought here that were in effect before Trump took office, and until we get change in New York State, probably will remain in effect. New York rankings. I always find these as factual information, hard to dispute, hard to say it's Republican spin. American Legislative Exchange Council, New York ranks 50th in the country for economic outlook, 49th in absolute domestic migration, with a cumulative total loss of almost, listen to this, almost 2 million residents between 2013 and 2023. New York's the Tax Foundation 2025 State Tax Competitiveness Index, New York overall rating, big surprise, 50th, last in the country. The Mercatus Center of George Mason University, second in the U.S. for the most regulations, with over 300,000 regulations. Chief Executive Magazine 2024 Best and Worst State for Business, New York ranks 49th. And certainly not last, but certainly not least, 2024 Thumbtack Small Business Friendliness Survey, New York got an overall score of F. And I wasn't a great student, but I usually avoided the F rating. So our next speaker, we have someone who is of great stature, that has obviously cares very much about New York State and has some ideas of how maybe we ought to change the state. Congresswoman Elise Stefanik was elected in 2014, 30 years old. Very impressive. And the first youngest woman elected congressperson, correct?
At the time.
At the time. Really very, very impressive. You know, when someone's that successful early on, very often they're going to have a very bright career in politics. And certainly Elise has done that. She became the 4th highest ranking in a relatively quick time, the 4th highest ranking Republican in the House. And as we all know, President Trump appointed her to be to be UN ambassador. But to Elise's great credit, unfortunately, maybe not for her career, but her credit, believing in what we have to do in this country with Republican values and issues, she remained in the House, which I think is a great tribute and really shows what type of character the Congresswoman is. So I think she has some ideas about the future of New York State, and we certainly hope her star continues to burn bright. She's been great for the North Country, close to me. She's been great for New York State, but I think also great for this country. So without further ado, Elise Stefanik.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Leader Ortt and Leader Barclay, for inviting me today to join you. Thank you to all the members of the State Senate and State Assembly Republican conferences. They are fighting the fight every day on behalf of their constituents in Albany. Here we are, another year, another failed, radical, reckless agenda and legislative session in New York State, passed by single-party Democrat rule, led by the worst governor in America, Kathy Hochul. I dubbed her the worst governor of America because she is. Kathy Hochul and far-left Democrats have once again failed New Yorkers with this year's legislative session. They have put New York last with this massive, bloated $254 billion budget. It is anti-worker, anti-family, anti-farm, anti-small business, anti-manufacturer, and anti-law enforcement. From job-killing regulations proposed like the insane 700-cow farm cap to pro-criminal policies that make our streets, communities, and campuses less safe, this budget and legislative agenda proposed by Democrats continues New York down the path to catastrophe, further exacerbating the affordability crisis and the crime crisis. And of course, this is all on top of the $10 million hidden taxpayer-funded slush fund to bail out Tish James for her criminal activity. Kathy Hochul's radical agenda is driving businesses and hardworking families out of our great state. Let's go over some of the highlights. Instead of cutting taxes or easing the cost of living to address the affordability crisis in New York, Kathy Hochul and Democrats doubled down on reckless spending, passing the largest budget in state history. It's why New York is losing residents and businesses at a record pace, like Leader Barclay just pointed out. Kathy Hochul and New York Democrats doubled down on making it harder to live and do business in the state of New York with painful policies like the so-called Packaging Reduction Act, which is a tax, make no mistake, on everyday goods, making groceries, household items, and essentials more expensive for every family in this state. They did nothing to improve the business climate, zero tax relief, no regulatory reform, no actions to keep employers here in New York. Instead, Democrats doubled down on job-killing mandates and further hiked payroll taxes in New York City. On top of this, New Yorkers are already paying some of the highest utility bills in the nation. Families and small businesses cannot afford another year of these soaring energy and utility costs. And what does Kathy Hochul do? What do New York Democrats do? We have the HEAT Act, which will eliminate affordable natural gas, further increase utility bills, and kill good to the Chobani CEO, but she won't speak out about Democrat legislation that would crush our farms. New Yorkers are smart. They see right through her catastrophe. It's one of many reasons why this past weekend she was booed once again at the Belmont in Saratoga. Meanwhile, in addition to the economic crisis, we have Kathy Hochul's pro-criminal agenda continuing to make New Yorkers less safe, putting violent criminals and illegals first and law-abiding New Yorkers last. New York Democrats rejected common sense reforms to fix bail laws and support our brave police. They ignored the violent crime in our subways and on our streets. Frankly, New York Democrats led by Kathy Hochul have abandoned our brave corrections officers and allowed our prison system to fall into utter chaos. Believe me, I represent so many COs in my district who know that this governor has turned her back on them. Instead, Kathy Hochul and New York Democrats push radical bills like the Earned Time Act, elder parole, fair and timely parole, Second Look Act. These measures put violent offenders ahead of victims. That's not justice. It's a disgrace, and it's fueling New York State's crime crisis. And on top of this, Kathy Hochul refused to repeal dangerous sanctuary city policies, sanctuary state policies that protect illegal migrant criminals over law-abiding citizens. And when state Senate Republicans tried to pass Lakin's law to let local law enforcement work with federal partners to remove dangerous individuals, Kathy Hochul and New York Democrats said no. Why? Because they care more about their radical far-left anti-American base than they care about public safety and border security. And then, of course, in the face of raging anti-Semitism and hate on college campuses, which I have led the charge on exposing in Congress, Kathy Hochul sat on her hands, refusing to pass real consequences for pro-Hamas criminals who spew vile hate and assault and threaten Jewish students. Their silence is complicity. And just last week, New York Democrats opposed legislation to honor the victims of the deadly attack on Jewish people, the deadliest attack on the Jewish people since the Holocaust, an absolute abomination. And if all that wasn't bad enough, as I said, you have New York Democrats who are the culmination of a corruption crisis in New York. This $10 million taxpayer-funded legal defense slush fund of your watching hard-earned taxpayer dollars for the most corrupt attorney general in the country, Tish James. Enough is enough. New Yorkers deserve better. They deserve leaders who care more about actually cutting your taxes rather than desperately lying about it and increasing spending like Kathy Hochul does. Leaders who protect your law-abiding family, not protecting violent criminals and illegals. I've been traveling the state, have been to many of these districts and meeting with everyday New Yorkers of all political parties, not just Republicans, but independents and Democrats as well. Please know that New York Republicans are listening to you. We hear you, the people of New York. We hear you loudly and clearly. It is time for new leadership to save our state. Thank you very much. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Rob Ortt.
Well, thank you very much, Congresswoman. I suspect you'll have to come back up here in a moment because I think most of the questions might be directed for you, but we will now open it up. Well, I guess I'll close by, first of all, thanking the Congresswoman for being here. She's very busy. She's going to DC later in like a short time. And she's going to go do her job that her constituents elected her to do and that she does so well. And of course, we are going to do the best we can here to fight against what will no doubt be hundreds of terrible, radical bills that'll be perpetrated on the people in New York over the next several days. So I want to thank her for being here. I want to thank all my colleagues for being here. And with that, we will open it up to questions. On-topic questions. Which means the topic.
I wanted to ask the Assemblyman Barclay about the I would say shenanigans, the thing that went on with pulling the bill, honoring October 7th. There was
Yeah, we were obviously disappointed. We feel like it got pulled for political reasons. We feel it was a good bill and it ought to have been at least brought up to the floor for a vote.
along the way.
Well, they serve in the majority. The speaker controls his ability to what bills get on the floor and what don't get on the floor. And they use the power they have as majority to make sure the bill didn't get to the floor.
Okay, next question. Robert Gavin, Buffalo News.
Hi.
On topic.
Thank you. This is for Representative Stefanik. The leaders of the two houses here in Albany have been very critical of the Republican, you and your 6 Republican colleagues, basically saying, why are you supporting the president's bill? They had a press conference this morning saying it would cost $13 billion in Medicaid cuts. And there's been some of your colleagues in other states, such as Iowa, when they've mentioned support from the bill, they've gotten boos and whatnot. What do you say to the criticism from the Democrats here about that this bill by the president is gonna really hurt New York? And they've consistently said to the press, ask people such as you. So my question to you is, what do you say to what they're saying?
Sure. So this bill, if we do not extend the Trump tax cuts, it will be the largest tax increase in our nation's history. Kathy Hochul supports the largest tax increase on top of the highest tax state in the nation in New York State. This bill also includes increased funding for border security, the construction of over 700 miles of border wall, as well as hiring 10,000 additional law enforcement to deal with border security. Kathy Hochul opposes that and instead prioritizes sanctuary city. It gets rid of these Green New Scan subsidies that have been creating these solar farms taking over our farmland in New York State, which people adamantly oppose. Kathy Hochul wants those subsidies to fall into place, to continue to stay into place. It also unleashes energy independence to lower energy prices and make it abundant for hardworking Americans. And yet in New York, Kathy Hochul opposes that at every opportunity. And on the Medicaid question, and this is very important, Kathy Hochul wants to use your hard-earned taxpayer dollars, over $1 billion, to fund Medicaid for illegals. What we believe as Republicans in Washington is that we should strengthen Medicaid, get rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse, which there is rampant, over $20 billion in New York, and not fund these programs for illegals. Instead, we want to improve Medicaid for New Yorkers who qualify, and that is what people support, whether you're Republicans, independents, or Democrats. But you in the media, do some honest reporting on the facts in this bill. We are not taking away Medicaid benefits. We are getting rid of Medicaid benefits for illegals specifically to improve them for New Yorkers who qualify.
On the subject of the Trump One Big Beautiful Bill, as it were, it's projected that it will result in thousands of New Yorkers, thousands of your constituents losing access to their benefits. Overall, the bill is expected to reduce available resources for the lowest income people while raising resources by cutting taxes for the highest earners. Are you comfortable with people in your district losing out on healthcare to fund tax cuts for rich people?
That's false talking points. You know, in Washington, it's always interesting. The media are stenographers for the Democrat Party. It appears to be the case in Albany and New York State as well. Nothing new. One of the bills that we're voting on this week is defunding NPR because, again, we are not going to stand for this stenography for Democrats instead of accurately reporting what's in the bill. What this bill does is it improves these programs, specifically Medicaid, for law-abiding New Yorkers who qualify, rather than the over $1 billion bailout for illegals, which is what Kathy Hochul wants to use your hard-earned taxpayer dollars for. Also, it extends the Trump tax cuts. It expands the child tax credit. It makes school choice available for families, which is a pro-parent policy, not just Republicans, but independents and Democrats as well. It increases border security. It unleashes energy independence. It will create the greatest economic boom. How do we know this? Because look at the first term of President Trump. We had the strongest economy in our nation's history, and we are going to get back to that again very quickly. Already look at the stats. So no, Kathy Hochul does not support this bill because she wants to continue raising taxes on New Yorkers. She wants to continue putting illegals first. She wants to continue sanctuary city policies that cost billions of dollars for New Yorkers so that illegals qualify for these programs. We are not going to stand for it. We have a mandate for the American people. I am proud to make sure that we pass this legislation to make good on our promises that the American people, we promised that to the American people, and we are certainly going to deliver it.
Right now, it appears it's very much up for debate whether the $40,000 salt cap change is going to remain on the table of the Senate. You know, your colleague Mike Lawler came in the other day. He said he would be a definite no if that were lowered. What about you? Do you stand by the 40,000? Do you see that as non-negotiable with the Senate?
Well, I negotiated it, and I think it's important that New Yorkers make sure that we have strong tax relief. But let's get to the root of the problem, which is we are the highest tax state in the nation. So number one, we need a new governor to cut taxes for New Yorkers. In the meantime, you better believe I'm going to continue to advocate for hundreds of billions of tax cuts for hardworking New Yorkers who are paying the price of this failed leadership. So I'm not going to set my myself on a number. I am going to say that I helped deliver that in a conversation with President Trump in the White House, as well as my colleagues in the New York delegation, as well as the Speaker of the House, to get that deal done. And for Kathy Hochul to criticize it, that's her criticizing hundreds of billions of dollars of a real tax cut instead of these fake tax scams that she's putting forward in her bloated budget would actually increase the spending for hardworking New Yorkers. No, I'm going to make sure, as I did, that we have tax relief for New Yorkers. I know in the slim majority that we need to use every tool we possible. I don't negotiate with you. I negotiate with the President of the United States and the Speaker of the House.
Are you concerned at all that controversy around this federal budget bill will actually have a negative effect on certain policies and progress for New York? Because it made congressional seats harder on for Republicans and even possibly governor's race in Republicans.
No, what I'm concerned about is this bloated budget from Albany is you're not asking about that. Here we are in Albany. It's single party Democrat rule, and Kathy Hochul has failed our state. What we are doing in Washington is to address the affordability crisis by cutting taxes. We are addressing the energy crisis by unleashing energy independence. We are addressing the border crisis by increasing funding for border security as well as law enforcement agents. We are actually dealing with all the challenges that have been created in this country with Joe Biden, Kathy Hochul, and Democrats for 4 years. So you're asking me about this in Albany? You know my position. I strongly support all of those provisions, and so do New Yorkers. What is going to be on the ballot next year is Kathy Hochul's failed leadership. And if you look at the poll numbers, she is the most unpopular governor in modern times, and her own lieutenant governor, her number 2, just announced he's primarying her. That's what people are focused on going into next November, and they are going to reward the Republicans for delivering on our promises to the American people.
Hi, so if you were governor looking at a big boarding budget, where specifically would you want to cut that down if you were to counter?
So first, you need to look at everything. You need to look at opportunities for savings in every program, waste, fraud, and abuse, get rid of green new scam programs. You also need to, and President Trump, I think, showed this very well, and I spoke with the Senate conference and Assembly conference about this ahead of time. There is so much action that can be taken on day one in executive orders. I would look at that model under President Trump, where he has successfully signed a number of executive orders. We need to do that in Albany. Albany has the most bloated budget out of any other state in the nation. We have to be able to find significant savings. I would also work with the state Senate Republicans and the state Assembly Republicans who have been working on these issues for decades to try to push back on the reckless spending. So this would be a partnership with these legislators. I'm standing here today.
Grace Ashford, New York Times.
As you know, the governor is constrained by the laws of the state, which require the state to pay for some health care for undocumented people. No matter who is the governor, if you were the governor, you would also be constrained by that. So I'm wondering if you could sort of speak to, if you were the governor, what your kind of plan of approach would be. And then as a congresswoman, knowing that that is the reality for the people of the state of New York, why do you feel that it's appropriate to cut $13 billion from the state's bill, knowing that what the only real effect that will have is to take away healthcare from, documented and undocumented New Yorkers alike?
Well, first of all, the Democrat governor, Kathy Hochul, supports taxpayer dollars going towards illegals. I haven't heard her speak out about that. Instead, I've heard her speak in support of that. I fundamentally disagree. I'm standing here with my colleagues who also disagree. Everyday New Yorkers don't want their hard-earned taxpayer dollars going towards programs for illegals rather than law-abiding New Yorkers who are here legally. So I think you can take executive action. I think you can work with the legislature to address that, but not on our watch. We are not going to fund taxpayer benefits for illegals in the state of New York. We are going to focus on New Yorkers first rather than this illegals first, New Yorkers last that Kathy Hochul has in place.
Channel 13, Elise Klein.
Sorry, WMHT. Congresswoman, can you explain a little bit more about why you support taking away funding from PBS and NPR, simply because you kind of explained you don't agree with the reporting? but can you talk about why you think you have that right when it comes to the freedom of the press?
I didn't say I don't agree with their reporting. I said they've been exposed as being stenographers for the left. These are entities that have promoted the Russia hoax. These are entities that promote whatever talking points the left puts out. Even in my own district, one of the public radios incessantly has put false information out, including on election day, where voting locations are. We are not going to stand for that. And for all of those of you in the press who are not with taxpayer-funded press entities, it is a competitive environment. There's lots of opportunity out there. Taxpayer dollars shouldn't be going to promote NPR and other organizations that are pushing forth their view. If you look at NPR, the studies, I think it was 0 Republicans or 0 conservatives on NPR. 0. You have the head of NPR who is an avowed anti-Republican. That is not reflective of fair media in this country. You all have First Amendment rights from other media outlets. You use it. You don't need taxpayer funding for it.
Nick Reisman, Politico.
I was wondering about your thoughts on what's going on in Los Angeles today over the last couple of days and President Trump's decision to deploy the National Guard there.
I fully support President Trump's decision to deploy the National Guard. I think Leader Barclay was spot on. The fact that you have Kathy Hochul criticizing it, but she is the same governor that deployed the National Guard into our prison systems, the hypocrisy, New Yorkers see through that. It's outrageous. We need law and order on our streets. We need law enforcement, and we need to enforce the laws on the books, and that includes border security. I believe when you see this in a state like California, it is a result of failed sanctuary city policies and appeasement for violent criminals over a number of years. I stand strongly with our law enforcement officers, and I know the members of this assembly and the state Senate on the Republican side stand strongly with our law enforcement officers as well, but I fully support it.
Jimmy Valentine, Wall Street Journal.
Jimmy.
Nick actually took my question, but I was wondering if you could talk generally about your thoughts about the increase in immigration enforcement that we've seen since President Trump took office again. Are you happy with how it's going? Are there any parts of it that you'd like to see increased, reduced, et cetera? And I guess calling up the National Guard in response to some counter protests that be part of that.
I fully support President Trump's executive actions, as well as it's why we're working so hard to get this reconciliation package done to make sure the resources are there for immigration law enforcement officers. That's both ICE, Border Patrol, and CBP. It's also important, and I'm advocating for increasing those numbers along the northern border as well. Look, this is a result of 4 years of a wide open border under Joe Biden, with upwards of tens of millions of illegals in our country. We passed the Lake and Riley Act, which was very, very important, strong border security. And think about that. The majority of Democrats voted against that bill. So we've put forth border security legislation after border security legislation. I think President Trump is taking exactly the right actions, enforcing the laws on the books, putting Americans first. And frankly, this is what he campaigned on. And the reality is he is more popular today than he was on election day in his handling of the border. So I strongly support it. And certainly we're going to advocate for the northern border issues, as I always have.
Last question, New York Post, Von Golden.
Hey, Congresswoman. The Democratic leaders this morning in their press conference, they said they want a full repeal of the SALT cap. They also don't want cuts, changes to Medicaid. Why can't they have both?
Well, first of all, Democrats were in power for a number of years. They failed to get any tax relief for New Yorkers. It is Republicans, New York Republicans, who are advocating effectively, mind you, for hundreds of billions of dollars of tax cuts for New Yorkers. And first of all, I'm sure you also didn't hear from them any proposal on how they're going to cut taxes for New Yorkers, and they just want to blame it on SALT. We are going to get this done. We will deliver on this promise that we have made to New Yorkers. And on the Medicaid issue, sure, I'm sure they want to continue funding over $1 billion for illegals. We want to improve, protect, and secure Medicaid for New Yorkers, hard-earned taxpayer dollars, making sure they're going to New Yorkers first and not illegal. So we're going to continue working through this process. It'll take the next couple of weeks, and the discussions are ongoing between the House and the Senate right now.
All right, we're good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.